Hey there, it's your boy Foxy, back for more relationship stories. Update to my entitled nephew stealing from me and getting arrested. Sister and brother-in-law had the money to pay me back the entire time. Original post. In a prior post in a different sub, I asked if I was the bad guy for wanting to call police on my nephews for stealing from me. And the overwhelming support I got made me realize that standing my ground was the best thing for me to do. About midway last week when I came home from work, I noticed my shed door was open and the padlock that I used to keep it shut was broken. And I had a lot of bags full of soda cans in there. I and my friends tend to drink a lot of soda, so I've built up a lot of cans over the course of about a year. And I was going to cash them in at the bottle drop soon, because I like big payouts. It's 10 cents a can where I live after all. But there were more than just my bags of cans missing from the shed too. They took my gardening shears, a steel rake, 2 shovels. One of them being one of those folding camping ones, a full 2-gallon gas can, a cheap power drill I got for like $5 used, an electric hedge trimmer, and a small electric chainsaw that was also used, and a machete. They didn't touch the lawnmower, weed whacker, extension cords, or the old radio I had in there. No idea why they took what they did. But I guess they figured they could resell them or something. I checked my camera footage, and there was my 3 nephews, ages 16, 15, and 14, breaking into my shed with one of their dad's large claw hammers. I recognized the hammer because it's bright yellow and black, and their dad has a bunch of them. It only took them a few hits to smash that cheap lock. After they first broke into my shed, they took what they could by hand. And then they came back with some shopping carts that I'm guessing they also stole, but it took them a few trips to get all of the cans. And they didn't bother to even try and close the door when they were done. My sister and brother-in-law first denied their kids stole anything from me, so I went to their house and showed them the security footage from my cameras. I'd not told them I had cameras installed. And the reason I had the cameras put in was because of prior thefts by my nephews. It started with food and snacks, and then moved on to DVDs and video games. Then pretty much anything they thought they could smuggle out after that. And anytime I made them return stuff they'd stolen from me, I was treated like the bad guy and then got the fakest apologies I've ever heard. And they never got in much trouble from their parents either. The final straw happened last year when my nephews broke into my house and stole 3 6-packs of my favorite blood orange beer from my fridge. They used my hidden spare key to get in, and also took a huge dump in one of my bathrooms, and not only didn't flush, but also peed all over the floor. And I'm pretty sure it was intentional. The beer they stole was hidden in one of their bedrooms when I confronted my sister and brother-in-law about my nephew stealing it. And I was basically given an equivalent to boys will be boys when I wanted them punished. So I had the cameras put in and told no one, which was a smart move. When my sister and brother-in-law saw the camera footage of my nephew stealing from me, they seemed furious. But they were actually madder that their boys skipped school to steal from me. They'd spent all day making repeated trips to the bottle drop and cashing the cans by machine. The bottle drop also pays by machine, so they just kept bringing the cans until they cashed them all. And then they bought video games and junk food with the money. Said money actually amounted to nearly $200. With that and the destroyed padlock, I told my sister and brother-in-law that they now owed me $200. My sister and brother-in-law went from being angry at their kids to making excuses for them and then being angry at me for wanting that money back when I know they have 3 kids and a mortgage. I said it was either that or I go to the police and press charges. They told me to get out, and I said they have 2 days to decide how to pay me back before I go to the cops. I got back everything else my nephews stole, machete and gas can included, though they'd already used the gas for something. But over the next couple of days, my sister and brother-in-law were blowing up my phone with a ton of messages, both verbal and text. At first they were calling me heartless because it was right after the holidays and they have 3 kids and a mortgage. Then they started gaslighting me, then even threatening me. And all of this would go in a repeating cycle. My nephews chimed in from another cell phone and were sending me lots of messages of their own, which were more fake apologies and gaslighting. My eldest nephew even sent me a picture of himself holding a soda can and giving me the middle finger, so I guess they weren't taking my threats of going to police seriously because family. When I last spoke with my sister and brother-in-law, they refused to negotiate any sort of method of repayment for what my nephews did, even when I suggested they just sell the video games that were purchased with the money from the cans. Then they had the audacity to say I'd actually tempted my nephews by having the cans in my shed to begin with. Oh yes, I'm the devil's snake that tempted my nephews with a shed full of cans that just screamed money, money, money. So that was it. I went to the police station that morning and filed the report. Gave them a copy of the video footage of my nephew stealing from my shed. I gave them the broken lock they smashed. Showed them all of the texts, which were screenshotted and also given as evidence. Hell, I even gave them a copy of the photo my eldest nephew sent me of him flipping me off. I did tell police that I found it worrisome that my nephews had taken the machete, but they classified it as a tool, especially since they took a lot of other actual tools. So fair enough on that, I suppose. But my nephews were indeed arrested on Saturday. Police came to their house and my sister and brother-in-law were forced to let them in because they had a warrant. Apparently all three of my nephews went from being cocky little turds to crying like babies when they were being put in cuffs. I know this because a neighbor I'm acquainted with that sort of friends with my sister was there to see it. And shortly after the arrest, my sister and brother-in-law were blowing up my phone again. They weren't able to get their kids out of jail till Monday morning, and now the boys are being charged with larceny, willful destruction of property and vandalism, and harassment. The police took this whole case pretty seriously, as there has been complaints about my nephews for some time but nothing was proven until now. The past few months, bags of cans have actually been going missing all over the area. Don't know if it was my nephews or not, but they're likely suspects. And with word spreading of their arrest, let's hope other neighbors with security cameras come forward with more footage. My sister and brother-in-law showed up at my house too. I refused to open the door and told them that this all happened because they are enablers who refuse to hold their kids accountable for their actions. That made them just scream and pound on my door more, till I threatened to call police on them too. And since I've done it already, they know I mean it now. So they left without any more trouble, but they went back to blowing up my phone. I didn't block my sister or brother-in-law. Instead, I decided to just save all of the messages they send me, because I've made the decision to take them to small claims court over this. I don't really need or want the money, and have already replaced the destroyed padlock with a much better one. However, the kids aren't the only ones who need to be taught a lesson. In the end, I hope I put them in enough of a hole that they learn not to screw with me ever again. I also have the full support of my family on this, my parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, etc. They're all supporting me in this because my nephews have stolen from them too. And after banning my nephews from my house, some of them did the same. I'm going to push for my nephews to get community service. And the reason why isn't just because it's a good idea, but also because I know that they'll hate that the most. Whenever made to do any kind of work they don't want to do, they just stand around griping and act like the whole world is against them. So hardly anything ever gets done. Perhaps a few hundred hours of unpaid work will teach them some manners. They've been spoiled far too much. Now for the top comments before reading the updates. All three of my nephews went from being cocky little turds to crying like babies. You did them a favor. In 10 years, they will understand why. Agreed. It's better to deal with the consequences as a minor than to get away with everything until you're an adult and daddy can't make it go away anymore. Definitely this. I know far too many people who kept their kids out of the legal system until they were adults and couldn't be controlled at all. Then the kids just ended up escalating and getting charged with offenses that put them in the prison system with records that will hinder them for life. Whereas they maybe would have had some community service or a night in juvenile that could have snapped them into reality before the consequences were so dire. I'd say community service plus restitution. Kinda what I'll be doing by filing with small claims court. Restitution goes on the kids. You'll be taking the parents to court over the money. That's two different lessons, one for each set. Don't stop creating these healthy boundaries. As I've said before, it's my hill to die on. We want updates when you get more info. If I can remember to, I'll post how things go in small claims court. Now for the first update. Well, this is stupidly anticlimactic. I figured that my sister and brother-in-law were gonna dig their heels in even deeper after the things that's already gone down. But they actually caved. I filed a lawsuit against them in small claims for the actions of their kids. In the suit, I was asking for $500. This was for the stolen cans, the destroyed lock, the cost of the replacement lock, which was a much better and more expensive one, the cost of filing with the courts, and emotional damages for the harassment. A friend whose father is a lawyer gave me a free consultation and said I have a very strong case because of the camera footage I have of both my nephews stealing from me and of my sister and brother-in-law pounding on my front door. Plus, all of the messages they sent me. When my sister and brother-in-law were served, they called me freaking out. They said I couldn't do this to them, so I retorted that this is the price they are paying for not parenting their kids and letting them become entitled little thieves. And if they wish to speak to me again, it will either be when I see them in court, or if they decide to pay me the $500 I'm suing for. Then I hung up on them. Well, yesterday evening I was having some friends over after work. We were just chilling out and watching a movie. None of us were in the mood for video games since we were tired from the day. and we just wanted a chill evening. But then I got a knock at the door. When I looked outside, there was my sister and brother-in-law, and they looked very unhappy. I opened the door, but left the screen door shut. Then asked them what they were doing at my house. They told me that they're tired of fighting because everyone is against them, and fully admitted how badly they messed up by letting this go as far as they did, and just wanted to make peace. My friends were standing in full view behind me, so there were witnesses to this. Brother-in-law then slid an envelope through a crack in the door that contained $500 in $50 bills. He said it was from his private savings account, then told me from now on they'll make sure my nephews are duly punished for their actions. They didn't ask me to drop the charges, but pleaded with me to at least be lenient. I said I was only pushing for community service, which is pretty lenient. And if we cooperate for that, then hopefully the judge will agree. They sighed and said they'd cooperate if that's all I wanted, then left without making any sort of a fuss. My friends all congratulated me on holding my ground. Others in my family later did the same. That's when I found out from my parents that they actually threatened to disown my sister if she and her husband didn't make some changes for the better. So now they are. It may be a forced change, but it's the best we'll probably see out of them. My mom paid my sister and brother-in-law a visit after they repaid me too. She told me that my nephews were not playing video games. In fact, every single video game related thing was put away somewhere. And so was the TV that my nephews would game and watch movies on. All three nephews were in their rooms most of the time, and were very rude and unwelcoming to their grandmother, but my sister claims they are dealing with the situation. So yeah, I've dropped the lawsuit now that I've been paid what I wanted. But my nephews are still going to court for theft, and are now getting the parenting they should have been getting long ago. I've also been assured that they will not be coming near my house again anytime soon, and are strictly only to be either at school or at home. Congratulations for getting your money back. Hopefully things go much better for you. I'd ask for an update in a year or so to see if it sticks. If you don't mind, of course. If I can remember to update after a while, I will. But this is a throwaway account, so who knows. Nice update. I always like to think changing one thing changes the entire story here. Like, changing your relationship would change the consequences of their actions. Like if you weren't related, it would be courts and full charges. If you've been a business, it would be courts and full charges. It's only that you're related you are being lenient. Cool to see they are having to make changes, forced or otherwise. It would happen one way or another. I have a feeling your sister and brother-in-law aren't going to be anywhere near as diligent in parenting their kids as they promised to be. But I am also betting that at least those little thugs in training will never dare to steal from you or their other relatives again either, and that's a start. Good for you, Yam, and good for your parents too. Kids who don't face consequences at home for wrongdoing grow up to be full-blown jailbirds. Especially is that true when the youthful wrongdoing is criminal in nature. Parents who make excuses for their kids when the kids break the law are doing their children no favor. I doubt those kids will ever win awards for good citizenship. On the other hand, you may well have saved their lives and their parents from heartbreak. Sadly, you may be right. They weren't good parents before, and they won't become good overnight. But maybe this whole mess has taught them enough of a lesson to at least put some effort into their duties as parents. Now for the last update 10 months later. To start off with, yes, I did get more cameras. One I installed right above the shed, so it looks like I've got the whole area covered. I want to say that my sister and brother-in-law, as well as my nephews, have learned from this whole ordeal, but that's not entirely the case. Especially for my eldest nephew, who just couldn't let go of wanting revenge on me, and he stupidly tried to get it. Here's what happened. To recap, as many previous readers know, my nephew stole a load of cans from my shed after breaking into it, and cashed them in at the bottle drop for about $200. My sister and brother-in-law acted like I was in a hole for wanting the money back for the cans and damages. I ended up pressing charges because they refused to pay, and things turned pretty ugly. I filed a small claims lawsuit, and they had to pay me back for the cost of damages, theft, emotional damages for constant harassment, and the cost of the lawsuit itself, all adding up to $500, which finally made my sister and brother-in-law raise a white flag and actually start parenting their kids. My nephews got all of their privileges taken away and were forced by a judge to work community service, which they hated and had to be forced just to complete. They didn't get more than 100 hours each because I'd been repaid by their parents when we settled out of court. So the judge pretty much fast-tracked the case. My nephews ended up picking up garbage and doing work around several local parks, and the man directing them, I heard, was a retired drill sergeant, so they had no fun whatsoever. My eldest nephew constantly showed his issues with authority and got into screaming matches with everyone who told him to work. His father had to be called over just to make the boy pick up a rake. The kid openly blamed me for his predicament, and his brothers were both initially on his side. But after a while, they realized that he's just crazy and entitled, and they no longer want any part of it. So my 2 younger nephews stopped following his lead, because it finally clicked just how in the wrong they were. Problem is that my sister and brother-in-law blamed me for the divide in their family, which didn't end well for them as no one in the family was on their side about it. Everything was put on them and their bad parenting. And without me to blame, they just became silent and bitter. Half the family don't want to associate with them, and now their own kids are divided because the eldest refuses to change. It got so bad that my eldest nephew resorted to something so incredibly dumb that you're not going to want to believe it. In the middle of the night, he sneaked out and attacked my house with a pair of his dad's claw hammers. I say a pair because he literally had one in each hand. The first thing he did was start smashing the new lock on my shed, and it didn't break. But he heavily damaged it to the point it was no longer usable, and I had to later remove it with bolt cutters. He also did a lot of damage to the shed door with the hammer's claws. I awoke to the sounds of the hammers and called the police after peeking out my bedroom window and seeing someone outside hitting the shed, though I didn't realize it was him at first because he had his face covered with a creepy-looking mask. He saw the bedroom lights turn on and chucked one of the hammers through my window. There was broken glass everywhere, and I'm lucky I didn't cut my feet on any of it because I was barefoot. Then my nephew started beating on my back door with the remaining hammer. He did major damage breaking the knob and the window on the door, and also tore into the door itself with the hammer claw. I was worried the door wouldn't hold out, so I yelled police were on their way, and he took off before they arrived. The night vision on my cameras showed it was him. He had a mask on, but was wearing his school hoodie, as well as his night shoes that were also pretty identifiable since his brothers don't have a pair like them. His fingerprints were also on the hammer he threw at my window. My nephews had already all been fingerprinted when they were arrested the first time, so police matched the ones on the hammer to him. When the cops came for my eldest nephew, he obviously denied it was him. But there's no one else it could have been. The other hammer was found in his room, along with the clothes and mask he wore, all of which were taken as evidence. The mask was of a Star Wars character I was told is called the Grand Inquisitor. This time though, his parents did nothing to try and protect him, and didn't try to pass the blame on me either. They just let their son be taken away screaming. I wasn't there to see the arrest, but I was told by my sister that my eldest nephew was switching back and forth from crying that he didn't do anything wrong, to screaming that it was all my fault, and he had to get back at me. The boy had to go through a serious mental evaluation, and was found to be potentially bipolar. Doesn't really excuse what he did though. Later on, when he was properly diagnosed as bipolar, he started blaming everything he did wrong on that, and acted like he should be vilified just for getting treatment for it. But he ended up having a month-long stint in juvenile hall. They got my nephew properly medicated, and he pleaded guilty to forego court again in exchange for more community service and mandatory counseling, as well as probation this time. His dad came to my house and personally replaced the broken window and door, though he barely said a word to me while doing it. My 2 younger nephews are still excluding their older brother from pretty much everything, and he still hasn't apologized for attacking my home either. He's also unfortunately repeating a school year because of how badly his grades tanked, which his parents are still very unhappy about. My 2 younger nephews dropped by on their own in July to personally apologize to me. They said that they always just followed their brother's lead, and he made everything they were doing seem so fun. But the punishments for the crimes are not worth the kind of fun they were having, and they don't want anything to do with it anymore. They want their fun uncle back and asked if we could start over. I said we can, but they'll have to earn back my trust, which they happily agreed to. My eldest nephew had his 17th birthday a few months ago, and basically got nothing, not even a cake. It was part of his punishment for what he'd done. I can only imagine how much money he's cost his parents in the past year alone. He led his brothers to steal from me, and then destroyed my bedroom window and back door. I imagine in total with the lawsuit I'd previously filed, and replacing both the door and window cost them over $1,000. Doors and windows are not cheap. Meanwhile, my youngest nephew had his birthday a month after that, and got a new mountain bike among his gifts. This really upset my eldest nephew, and he slashed the tires on the bike with a kitchen knife, which landed him in even more trouble. I know a thing or two about fixing bikes, so I went out and bought new tubes and tires for the bike and put them on it. So the bike is fine, and my nephew thanked me a lot for fixing it. My eldest nephew resorted to trying to run away because he wasn't being enabled anymore. He just walked out, got on his bike with a backpack full of stuff, and rode off. His parents quickly reported him missing because he left a goodbye letter that basically blamed me and his bipolar for all his problems. In the letter he stated that he can't wait till he's 18 to get away from us all, so he was doing us a favor by getting rid of himself sooner. But he came back 3 days later without his bike or backpack and looking beat up. He wouldn't tell anyone what happened, we still don't know. But he was chewed out for continuously using me as a scapegoat for his personal issues, because blaming me was the first thing he did after he got back. I didn't make him steal from me, I didn't make him attack my house, I didn't make him run away. That was all him. And he nearly ended up back in juvie for running off because he violated his probation, but he got off easy somehow. Currently he spends his days pretty much in his room when not in school, or doing chores, or going to counseling. He finished his community service, but his probation will last till he's 18. He got some leniency for being diagnosed as bipolar, but it couldn't get him off the hook, and believe me, he tried many times. Once they told him what was wrong with him, it became his excuse for everything, but plenty of people go their whole lives with that same mental condition and never do the kinds of things he did. I've been mending things with my 2 younger nephews, but I don't want to be around the eldest at all, and the feeling is clearly mutual on his part. I've only seen him once in person the past few months, and he glared at me with more hate than I've ever seen from anyone before stomping away. He can't paint me as the villain anymore without being called out on it, so there isn't much he can do other than just try and get through this. For the most part, he's totally shut down since school started. I'm told he barely speaks even at school. My other nephews tell me he's getting laughed at and ostracized, which I don't think is going to help him get better. My sister and brother-in-law are also not on the best terms with me right now as well, but they can't exactly put any blame on me either. They know it was all on them and their bad parenting. I've basically forced them to be more active in their kids' lives, which they should have been doing already. They complain a lot of being tired from work and keeping an eye on their kids, so whenever we talk as of late, it's always awkward and forced. They don't come to my house or me to theirs. But we do see each other at my parents' house, and our mother demands we be civil there, which I have no problem with. My 2 younger nephews have regained most of their privileges. They got their TV and video games back. But my eldest nephew isn't allowed on them at all. I'm told he's got some electronic entertainment in his room, but as to what kind, I don't know. I just know he spends most of his time in there unless he has to be somewhere else. My eldest nephew is also not welcome pretty much anywhere in the family anymore. I've recently heard from my parents that they don't even want to see him on Thanksgiving or Christmas Eve this year because they are sick of his behavior and petty thievery. I guess I can understand that, but even I feel it's a bit harsh. My sister and brother-in-law do as well, because they are threatening to boycott if he can't come to either holiday. I can't stand that kid and would not want him in my house either, so I can understand why they've made that decision. But I don't think excluding him from everything and everyone is going to make him better. It's going to take a long time for my eldest nephew to mend bridges, if they can even be mended at all. The way things stand, he may try running off again once he's of age. Unless the last time scared him too much to try it again. But hopefully things will get better for him in time if it's not too late to fix his behavior. I may not like him, but he's still my nephew, and I care. But I'm kinda powerless. Hey there, it's your boy Foxy, back for more relationship stories. Am I wrong for not trying to convince my parents to treat all their grandchildren equally? I, 47 male, got divorced from my first wife when I was 29. We had 2 kids and my folks loved them more than anything. But my ex-wife wasn't happy with the lifestyle that I could provide. I wasn't making a lot of money, but we weren't in debt or anything. We had good cars, and we had just put a down payment on our first home that we would own. Meanwhile, her boss was rich, he was 47 and he could provide luxuries that were out of my reach, and she left me for him. I still had to pay child support, but I guess I was lucky that I didn't pay spousal support. I had to work and I couldn't get custody. I got visitation, but my ex made it hard. The kids were young, and she manipulated them. If I had planned to take them to a local resort for our summer vacation, she would take them to Disneyland the week before. So, I would always come up short. Eventually the kids refused to spend time with me. It went to court, and I basically had to accept that I couldn't force them to see me and my parents. I met my second wife, 33, at the dog park when I was 37 and she was 24. She had a son who was about the age my son was the last time my parents got to see him. My parents accepted him right away. He loves them, and my wife is like a daughter to them. It is what I always wanted for a life. We have 2 more kids now, and my stepson is about to graduate next year. So a few years ago, my dad sold his company. He is an engineer and he had some patents that ended up being worth a fair bit of money. He paid off my house. He also made educational funds for my 3 kids. He figured the older ones were done school and hadn't bothered to visit them in years, so they didn't need anything from him. Turns out that was wrong. My ex-wife married a scam artist. He was rich, but he wasn't rich enough for the lifestyle she wanted, so he stole from his clients. And then he went to jail. My oldest kids are in a lot of debt, while my ex is living with her parents. She recently tried to tell me that my parents needed to be fair with all their grandchildren. I told her it was their money to spend on the people they loved and who loved them back. She said that we were punishing her kids for her mistakes. I said that both of our kids were adults and hadn't made any effort to see me nor my parents in over a decade. She said I'm being a bad person for not convincing my parents to help her kids. Now for the top comments. Not wrong. It's not your money. And your ex and the kids made their choices. This is like getting angry at a will. It's not supposed to be fair. Not wrong, and I love it when karma hits. I am a big fan of karma too. But here, OPS children were manipulated by their mom. Still, they could visit at last their bio dad once they are old enough to understand. We are not hearing the both sides of the story here, so not sure what made them so bitter about their dad. Not wrong. Don't fall into your ex's trap again. I understand kids being manipulated, but at the same time, your parents didn't have much choice with either of them visiting, or even greeting on special occasions. I would want my near and dear to enjoy my fruits of my labor, rather than some distant family member. As much as it isn't the kids' fault for being manipulated, it is on them to work at overcoming it. They need to recognize what their mom did, and ultimately what it did to them. They still need to work to make amends. And for the right reasons, not just to alleviate their debt. I grew up being manipulated, as well as being the victim of manipulation. I understand the struggle of having to take responsibility for something I didn't create. But I also understand how hard it is to convince those who have been manipulated against you to see it that way, and you have to put up a guard to protect yourself. It's a sucky situation, but it not unresolvable. Not wrong, she made her bed, and she must lie on it. Kids are adults now, they could have made an effort to know you and your family, they didn't. She's only reaching out because money bags was money rags, and she realizes what she could have had and hoping to still cash in. It has nothing to do with you and your family, but about how she can cash in. Next story. Am I wrong for not supporting my ex? Ex broke up with a decade ago, 3 months before our child was born. Said I wasn't fit to be a father due to an opioid addiction. I'd been in a wreck that caused severe spinal damage and pain, and formed a habit that I'll admit took me a lot longer to kick than I'm proud of. She was never in any way supportive on that particular subject, but her leaving me over it was out of the blue. Court said custody would be 50-50, and it has been since. In that decade, I've done okay, remarried a wonderful woman who I've had 2 girls with, and was promoted into a position with a 7-figure salary. Meanwhile, my ex has not done well. She's remarried twice and was broken up with both times. Filed bankruptcy, lives in what I can only describe as a crap hole apartment. I make sure my son is well taken care of, my wife, girls, and I spend every moment we're legally entitled to spend with him, and we offer to include him in quite literally everything, which his mother frequently declines when it's on her time. My son and ex both know as well that if he needs anything he can call and ask. I've sent food, clothing, and so on frequently, and several times put them both up in a hotel because their apartment was being fumigated or something. But both my parents, my ex's parents, my sister, and of course my ex, feel I should be financially supporting my ex. Their reasoning is that my son stays with her half the time, she's the mother of my son, and during those times he's with her. They're both living in squalor, and my son gets upset every time he has to go to his mother, who he started saying he hates as of late. When she tells him she won't feed him because it's expensive and to call me because I have money, it's no small wonder. So far as I'm aware, she can afford to feed him. She's working 2 jobs, but she'd rather I pay his expenses so she can afford expensive shoes, in addition to the minimum payment on her maxed out credit cards. I've tried to get sole custody. The courts made it clear that short of her murdering several people, that's not happening. I've held my ground thus far, as I feel I've no responsibility for her, and I've no desire to support her using my son against me for her own financial gain, which is exactly what she's doing. My wife says she sees both sides. So, am I wrong for not financially supporting my ex because it affects my son? Not wrong. She wants 50-50, then it is on her to take care of him for her 50. You are not responsible for her. I am sorry you were unable to get full custody. Is there any way to give your son a card he can use to buy food when at his mom's if she doesn't feed him? He's only 11, so no one will take a card from him. Right now, he'll text me or my wife and I'll Amazon overnight, DoorDash, or whatever he needs. We tried cash, but his mother would take it all. Not wrong, but if you're making over $1 million a year, you must be smart enough to figure out how to protect your son. Call CPS or similar if it's truly squalor. Pay for a lawyer, do something besides complaining about it on Reddit. Act. I've tried. The court told me that if I tried again without proof of gross neglect, they'd consider me to be harassing her. It's been extremely frustrating, and I don't see that the courts are being at all reasonable. As I'd said, it seems nothing short of her murdering several people is going to make a difference. My attorneys tell me it's just how it is in this state. Your son needs to be telling his teachers that his mother is refusing to feed him and he has to text you or go hungry. They are obliged to report it. Also get some therapy happening for your son. This will also count in your favor. It would be incredibly dangerous for OP to tell his son to mention this to teachers because of the court's prior warning. They'd likely see it as parental alienation. Save proof of everything she says and does that is neglectful of your children. Text messages, emails, etc., where she is saying anything like that. Hire a good attorney and bring her back to court again. You can even report to your son's school if his mother is neglecting or mistreating him. They are obligated to report it. You clearly provide for your child and are a good parent. You can prove to the courts that she is unfit if you have sufficient documentation. You need to speak to an attorney. Reddit is not the place for this, but you are not wrong for not wanting to financially support her. It's only your job to financially support your kid. Next story. Am I wrong for telling my mom to shut the heck up about karma? My mom was cheated on by my dad, and the lady my dad cheated with got pregnant and my dad decided to leave my mom for her. Their kid is now 17 male. I'm gonna call him Luke. My mom does not like Luke or my dad, or Luke's mom. I'm not close to any of them either. I despise my stepmother, and I hated my dad for a long time too, but our relationship has improved. I barely have a relationship with Luke, but that's improving too. One thing my mom believes in is karma, or at least her definition of it. Ever since the day she found out my dad cheated, she's been telling me about how karma will get him and the other woman back disguised as Luke. Something happened to Luke a couple years ago. My mom called it karma. This was disgusting to me because while I usually just let my mom say whatever because she's been through a lot, I draw the line at her calling my half-brother's trauma karma. Instead of just minding her own business, my mom told everyone and their moms about how this was karma getting them back. We had a massive fight about it and didn't talk for months, but she eventually apologized. I've been spending some time with Luke because my dad said he's been feeling a bit down since he broke up with his girlfriend, and I wanted to catch up. My mom doesn't like it but keeps her mouth shut. Anyways, I was staying the night at my mom's house for reasons and was FaceTiming my husband in my room. I told him how Luke's actually a really fun kid to be around, and that I'm very glad he's been able to rise above everything that's happened to him. I then said, he's been through a lot. The second I said that, I heard a sound outside my door, hung up, then found my mom listening. I asked her what the heck she was doing, and she immediately said, you shouldn't care this much. Hate to say it, but this is just karma at work. I doubt this is the last struggle he'll have to deal with. Karma's unforgiving like that. I was honestly mostly really disappointed. I ended up yelling though, and told her to shut up about her stupid freaking karma and move on. It's been 17 years, and she sounds insane. My mom was all like, how could you say that? You know what I've had to deal with. Are you betraying me too? I just rolled my eyes at her and walked into my room. She began to yell at me through the door saying I broke her heart, and how I'm being incredibly cruel, etc. She didn't talk to me the next morning and looked as if she cried all night. My older sister says that I should apologize and that I should be kinder, but I don't know. Am I wrong here? Edit. I'm a 30-year-old female. My dad and mom are both the same age and 50 plus. My dad married his affair partner who is also 50 plus and had my brother who is 17 years old. Now for the top comments. Not wrong. If anything, wouldn't the karma be against your dad and stepmom who cheated? What did Luke do other than be born? I'm sure you're sorry for your mother and it's your dad's fault for cheating, but maybe you should urge her to get therapy or something. I asked my mom the same question and she said that Luke is their karma. I don't really get it, but apparently she believes that when a person cheats and has an affair child, then that child will be very difficult for the parents as karma for cheating or something like that. Luke was in as a bit of a troublemaker, so she likes to call that karma as well. Lol, if I recommend therapy, I think she will actually lose it. My older sister tried, but my mom was firmly against it. Not wrong. The level of vitriol your mother has for your half-brother is alarming. He had nothing to do with your father's decision to cheat, and celebrating his misfortunes as karma is not acceptable. I think it's important to the story that OP isn't just being nice to dad's affair partner's unrelated kid because he's been through a hard time. He is their flesh and blood sibling, regardless of how he was conceived. And yes, mom is harboring an irrational amount of vitriol for her child's sibling and being very callous to her own child in the process. If OP's mother keeps doing what she does, karma is probably coming for her too. Last story. Am I wrong for not giving my stepdaughter a trust fund? I, 39 female, come from a very wealthy family. I never had to struggle for anything because my mom or dad would always give it to me. I can say that I grew up spoiled, but I grew out of that phase once I had my twins. Since I was so spoiled and never got in trouble for anything as a teenager, I was always going to parties with my friends, doing drugs and drinking alcohol. Then at 16, I found I was pregnant and gave birth at 17 to my 2 beautiful twins, girl and boy. Thankfully, my parents were supportive and helped me through the process. My parents had set up a trust fund for me when I was a kid, and I wasn't able to access until I was 18, so when I turned 18, I moved out and got a condo. I only used my trust fund whenever it was for my kids, rent, or essentials around the house. I also took some out and put it in an emergency fund. I got a job at my dad's company, so I was able to live comfortable but not keep up with the lifestyle I grew up with. When I was 31, I met my now husband and his daughter, who was 4 years younger than my kids. Me and my husband dated for about 4 years, then we got married 2 months before my twins' birthday. On my twins' 18th birthday, my parents gifted them each a trust fund of their own that summed up to $200,000 each. Now my twins are both 22 years old and both are thriving. I like to give myself a pat on the back for how I raised them and not how my parents raised me. Now to issue at hand. My stepdaughter is now 18 years old, and for the past couple of months, she's been saying how she couldn't wait to get her trust fund like my twins, and I didn't know if she would or not because I never knew about the twins. Now when her birthday came around, she did get money, just not the trust fund from my parents. Instead, they gave her a car. But to say she disappointed is an understatement. She said we didn't love her because she wasn't blood, and that we've always treated her different because she wasn't my daughter. Which wasn't true. I've loved her from the day I met her, and I've always treated her like she was one of mine. She then asked me why didn't I tell her she wasn't getting a trust fund, since that was all she was talking about, and I told her I didn't know if she was getting one or not. She then told me that I should have made one for her myself. I tried to tell her that it wasn't possible, but she didn't want to listen to me and just said she hated me. So am I the a-hole? So you married her dad 4 years ago, and somehow she felt that when she turned 18, she'd be entitled to a generous trust fund from your parents. Is that correct? That's kinda crazy, to be honest. But what's crazier is that nobody, not you, not your husband, sat her down when she started to bring this up and say it probably will not happen. Not wrong. It's a wild expectation for a 17-year-old to have, but one of her parents should have curtailed that expectation before it got out of control. My husband has told her multiple times to not be expecting the trust fund because she might not get it, and I also told her that I didn't know if she would get one or not, but she has chosen to ignore us. My husband did actually sit her down and told her that she shouldn't expect it, but she just brushed him off. Well then, this was an enormously optimistic or entitled reach on her part. A little immature, but nothing that can't be fixed. Try and explain that opening a trust fund like this requires years of putting money in. You cannot just give someone a fund of this size after 4 years. Not wrong. Your stepdaughter has been part of the family for only 4 years. Why would she feel entitled to a trust fund from your parents? How has your husband handled her expectations? That's what I was thinking. If they set up a trust for OP when she was kid, they probably set up a trust for the twins after they were born, and had 18 years to contribute and let interest accrue. If anything, maybe let the grandparents know she was talking about it and see if they were going to do the same for the stepdaughter, but I'm really not sure how I feel about that. It's the grandparents' money to do with as they please, not the stepmom's.